Hi everyone, it's Katrina. How advanced are we today compared to thousands of years ago? Some discoveries make it seem like we haven't come that far at all. From a surgical implant that defies logic, a machine that you won't believe existed, and the truth about the alien influence over the Maya. Today's video is non-stop ancient technology that will blow your mind. So let's go. The wall lost in the jungle. What kind of technology was required to build this megalithic wall in the jungle of New Zealand? Listen to this and then let me know what you think. The wall looks like something you would expect to see rising from the depths of the Amazon, where a lost city once stood, but it's actually in New Zealand, tucked away inside the Kaimanawa state forest. The mysterious wall appears to be evidence that New Zealand was inhabited by a highly advanced civilization, presumably tens of thousands of years ago. This mysterious race of humans was somehow able to move stones larger than life itself. It's hard to appreciate the size of the wall until you are standing before it. This thing is huge and appears to be mostly buried underneath the forest floor. The jungle wall could go dozens of feet deeper, meaning the bottom is locked inside the earth itself. This structure is older than the first people in New Zealand. It predates human beings living on the island. But how does that make any sense? According to modern scientists, the Maori arrived in New Zealand about 800 years ago, and this is the story told by the Maori themselves too. But the wall, which looks like a barricade of stacked stone blocks, is at least 2,000 years old. Some have guessed it could be 2 times, 4 times, or even 10 times as old. In the 1990s, after the wall was discovered, it created some drama between the New Zealand government and the native Maori tribes. There were experts who suggested the wall was created by a pre-Polynesian culture, one who arrived in New Zealand before the Maori. This caused an issue with the Maori, who say they were the original inhabitants of New Zealand and that nobody came before them. This is a very important fact to the Maori people, who consider themselves the first nation of New Zealand. It's also a bit offensive to say that the Maori could not have built a wall like this in the past. There have been other explanations given for the mysterious wall. Some say it's simply a natural formation, but there doesn't seem to be anything simple about it. It seems like whoever built it could have been giants with the size of these stones. Others have claimed it is less than 100 years old. So basically everyone's all over the place with this thing. In 1996, researcher Barry Brailsford from Christchurch launched an investigation with help from experts from all over the world. The team concluded that there was no doubt in their minds that the stones were cut on purpose. They also determined that the ancient structure is related to other megaliths found across the Pacific and in South America. In other words, the wall is evidence of a civilization that stretched across the globe. Whatever civilization this was, they were majorly advanced enough that they had made a primitive form of electricity. They may have been able to make glass and metal, and maybe they had levitation machines to help lift the impossibly heavy stone blocks of their walls. How else would they have done it? But when were they around? Geologist Philip Andrews made his own assessment of the wall shortly after the 1996 investigation. He identified the volcanic ignimbrite rocks as being 330,000 years old, which is a lot older than 2,000 years. He also concluded that they are entirely natural, and that the fractures between them are the result of a cooling process. It seems at this point that the ancient wall is stuck between a rock and a hard place. Scientists can't agree on if it's ancient, artificial, natural, or evidence of an unknown civilization. I want to know your thoughts on this in the comments. What is the deal with this insanely big wall? The implant that shouldn't exist. Scientists are baffled by a medical marvel discovered inside the leg of a mummy from 2,600 years ago. This thing should not exist. It doesn't make any sense. The ancient mummy lived at a time when this kind of science wasn't supposed to have been around. In 1971, a sealed Egyptian coffin was transported from Egypt to California, where it was accepted by scientists at the Rosicrucian Museum. The coffin contained the mummified body of an Egyptian man. At the time, nobody knew who the mummy was. It's likely he had somewhat of a high status, but not high enough to be royal. Maybe he was a key government official, but nobody could say for sure. Anyway, the mummy was kept at the museum and nobody paid much attention to it for 20 years. And then came the bombshell. 2 decades after the mummy arrived at the museum, scientists discovered an advanced surgical instrument inside its left knee. Inside the mummy's leg was a metal orthopedic pin. Alright, so he had a pin in his leg. Surely an Egyptian doctor could have crammed the 9-inch chunk of metal in there, right? Couldn't be that hard, could it? It absolutely is that hard. The orthopedic pin had been installed with such phenomenal biomechanical principles that I'm surprised that scientists didn't faint. The experts couldn't distinguish the implant from a modern-day procedure. Make no mistake, this advanced surgery is not something that ancient societies practiced. Scientists have found evidence of certain medical procedures before, especially trepanation, aka brain surgery. I've even discussed prosthetic limbs and eyeballs on the channel. This is a one-of-a-kind discovery. Surgeries that required this kind of medical precision are unheard of anywhere in the ancient world. How was the pin inserted with such precision, especially considering the lack of modern surgical tools and knowledge? How did the ancient Egyptians manage to perform such a procedure without causing significant pain or trauma to the patient? The plot thickens when you start to dig into the history of the mummy. When the museum originally acquired the coffin in the 1970s, they didn't even know it had a mummy in it at first. And then, when they investigated the coffin, they realized the mummy was not even the original owner. The ancient sarcophagus belonged to a priest named Usermontu, but the body did not belong to that priest. The priest had been removed from his own coffin shortly after his death and replaced by this random body. Nobody knows the name of the coffin thief. An analysis of the embalming procedure revealed that the stranger was an upper-class Egyptian male who lived between the 16th and 11th century BC. Now, try to guess what he looked like. I'll give you a hint. He looked nothing like how you might be imagining ancient Egyptian people looked. If you guess that he stood 5 foot tall and had red hair, then you're right on the money. This man had fiery red locks and didn't even break the 5-foot mark. It was in 1995 that scientists at Brigham Young University in Utah carried out X-ray scans of the mummy and found his metal pin. They couldn't believe their eyes. Head professor C. Wilfred Griggs refused to believe the pin had come with the mummy. He thought it was a modern piece of metal used to reattach the mummy's leg, but nope, it is indeed 2,600 years old. Scientists found ancient organic resin on the metal pin that is similar to modern bone cement, proving the pin came from an ancient procedure. This definitely means that at least somebody in the ancient world was way more advanced than we ever thought possible. The crystal jar's poison. A secret lost to time is about to be revealed. Hidden within a treasure trove unearthed in Scotland, a mysterious potion waits to be decoded. Scientists are using modern advancements in technology to reconstruct the potion once held in one of the most precious jars that has ever been found in a treasure hoard. This is a new discovery, with the Galloway hoard only being unearthed in 2014. A man with a metal detector was wandering through a field in Galloway, Scotland, when he came across a lost cache of amazing Viking relics. It proved to be the richest discovery of its kind ever found in the region, and the regions nearby. The treasures were acquired by the National Museum Scotland in 2017. How much do you think the museum paid for the treasure? I'll tell you, it was a whopping $2.5 million. That's not a bad payday for waving a metal detector around in a field. Since 2017, scientists have been hard at work analyzing each and every object found in the hoard. There are silver crosses, beautiful bird-shaped pins, silver pots, woven textiles, Anglo-Saxon brooches, gold reliquary pendants, and the list goes on and on. One of the silver pots proved to be a Persian relic. X-ray imaging revealed strange Zoroastrian symbols on it, and pictures of leopards and tigers. The vessel was likely produced around 680 AD, making it 200 years old already when it was buried. It may have been a spoil from a Viking raid. The most amazing item of all was a rock crystal jar from the Roman Empire. A Latin inscription on the base of the jar reads, "Bishop Hygald had me made." The jar was crafted from a chunk of crystal and wrapped meticulously in gold thread. The jar is remarkable, but not just for its advanced craftsmanship. Scientists think the jar could contain trace elements of the potion it originally held. Dr. Martin Goldberg at the National Museum Scotland speculated that the jar could have held a rare and exotic liquid, maybe a perfume, maybe an ointment. It could have been an anointing oil used at royal ceremonies. Nobody will know what kind of potion was in the jar until scientists are able to identify the trace chemical elements. Hopefully they'll get it done soon so I can tell you all about it. And now for a quick break, because it's shout-out time! I want to give a huge thank you to Lisa Monington and Janie Smith for supporting this channel. Thank you so much! Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already to join the Origins Explained family. Mummies and cheese. I can't think of a stranger lunchtime combination than mummies and cheese, but here I go anyway. In the barren desert of northwest China, a place so desolate even mice are scarce, lies a treasure trove of 3,500-year-old mummies, sprinkled with the world's oldest known cheese. The story of the Tarim Basin mummies gets more intriguing the longer it goes on. It all began with an Aboriginal hunter in 1911. He was moving through the sand dunes of the Tarim Basin desert when he found a bunch of random wooden poles sticking up out of the ground. It was a scene straight out of Indiana Jones. All these protruding wooden poles in an otherwise flat landscape was creepy to see. In 1934, that very same hunter guided Swedish explorer Folke Bergman to the site, where he uncovered 12 burials. There was clearly something very exciting hidden beneath the sands, but the outside world didn't seem concerned about it. The burial ground was forgotten and reclaimed by the desert. It wasn't until the year 2000 that Chinese archaeologists from Xinjiang rediscovered the cemetery. Between 2002 and 2005, they uncovered 167 tombs. The artifacts unearthed were as bizarre as the location. Archaeologists found an astonishing number of relics carved in the shapes of men and women's private regions. Whichever culture buried their dead under this harsh, sandy hellscape had an obsession with reproduction. It's the mummies that scientists have been the most interested in ever since the discovery of the tombs. Researchers found several mummies dating to 3,600 years ago. Weirdly, many of them were covered in a bizarre sprinkling of white material. The unknown substance bothered archaeologists because they couldn't figure out what it was. Not until now. Recent tests have revealed that the light sprinklings were bits of fermented dairy. Now scientists think it is the oldest cheese that has been found anywhere on the planet. And for the first time, scientists have successfully analyzed DNA from the ancient cheese. Xiaomei Fu from the Chinese Academy of Sciences said that cheese samples are a rare opportunity. Scientists have never been able to fully reconstruct the history of fermented dairy, and now they have a chance. People have been eating cheese for thousands of years, from Eastern Europe all the way to China and Africa. It's just odd because making cheese takes a lot of science. People had to ferment milk to make their cheeses and their yogurts, which typically required agriculture and animal husbandry. DNA evidence suggests the Tarim Basin mummy cheese was a type of kefir cheese. It was so beloved that it was sprinkled on the bodies of the deceased for a tasty afterlife snack. The existence of such sophisticated cheesemaking in a remote, dusty civilization highlights the lengths that humans will go to for a delicious cheese, even 4,000 years ago. The Stonehenge of the Pacific. The Stonehenge of the Pacific is a truly awe-inspiring monument. It is an ancient trilithon that stands 17 feet tall and is made from giant slabs of coral limestone. It's a structure that makes people gasp when they see it for the first time. No matter how hard scientists try, they can't figure out how it was made. It doesn't look as exciting as Stonehenge, maybe because there aren't as many stones. But be sure that this ancient monument is a feat of incredible engineering. Each coral limestone slab weighs upwards of 40 tons. The megalith is standing in a forested clearing, looking like a lawn ornament at the edge of the jungle. It's called Stonehenge of the Pacific, but it's not its real name. Located on the Tongan island of Niutoa, the standing stones are known as Ha'amonga a Maui. In English, the name means Maui's burden. Locals tell an ancient story about how their god Maui brought the stones himself and built the monument with his own 2 hands. It's an exciting myth, but one that scientists aren't too sure about. Archaeologists believe Ha'amonga-Amaui was built by a king in the 13th century as the gateway to his royal palace, but that's only a guess, and archaeologists have a few of them. They've also suggested the henge-like stones may have been used for astronomical purposes. I wish I had all the right answers to share with you, but the sad truth is that no one can say how the ancient people of the island carved the stones, moved the stones, and then lifted the stones upright. All I can say is that this Stonehenge has stood for at least 700 years as an unbelievable testament to human ingenuity. Yet it could be older. For all anyone knows, it could be as old as the Stonehenge. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Lost ancient technology that made a comeback. The Minoans were a maritime superpower, their ships legendary across the ancient world. But their shipbuilding secrets were lost to time, leaving behind a tantalizing mystery that has puzzled scholars for centuries. Minoan technology from 3,500 years ago was so advanced that it wasn't seen again on this planet until the 1950s. Scientists have described this technology as a lost art, one that was not used by or transferred to any other civilization. But why not? The Minoans were all about shipbuilding. This seafaring civilization used incredibly sophisticated techniques for building their boats. The most impressive part is that their materials were 100% natural. The Minoans of ancient Greece didn't have steel or carbon fiber or any modern materials like that. But they created seaworthy composite ship hulls so savvy they make modern ship hulls look weak in comparison. So what happened to their ships? The Minoans were building incredible boats until 1500 BC. Then the art of their shipbuilding was lost. People didn't start making similar boats until 70 years ago. The secret to building a superior hull was a combination method of tapered dowels, strong joints, and the application of linen cloth with pine resin. The cloth and the resin created a natural polymer to seal the hull with the effectiveness of concrete. In fact, the Minoan cloth used by shipbuilders was similar to aerolinen, used in early airplane building. The properties of Minoan cloth are similar to modern e-glass fiber. As for why this incredible technology was lost, that might be a political issue. The Minoans relied heavily on their ships for everything from trade to national security. Their shipyards were strictly controlled by the royal palace. As such, Minoan kings may have controlled the secret to expert shipbuilding. They likely kept it under wraps in the same way the US tried to control the secrets to building a nuclear bomb in World War II. As a side note, I'd like to mention that in Greek mythology, Icarus was raised on the island of Crete during the reign of the Minoan civilization. Icarus was the one who flew too close to the sun after his genius father, Daedalus, made a set of wings for him. Daedalus was also the man who built the labyrinth for the Minotaur for King Minos. The Mayas' secret alien technology. The ancient Maya civilization has shocked archaeologists at every turn. For decades now, researchers have puzzled over the ancient culture's incredible use of technology. Specifically, they've been wowed by the astronomical knowledge boasted by this high-intelligence culture. All of this amazement has led to questions that remain unanswered. Who gave the Maya their advanced knowledge of the cosmos? Were they gifted their amazing technology by ancient alien gods? To answer this question, we need to investigate the gods themselves. The Maya pantheon was filled with deities, a lot of deities. They had just as many gods and goddesses as the Greeks, the Mesopotamians, the Egyptians. They had a full house. But there was one god revered higher than the others, and that was Kukulkan, the feathered serpent. The Aztec worshipped the exact same serpent god, only they called it Quetzalcoatl. In Maya mythology, it was the serpent who gave them their wisdom. They were able to look to the stars and design their highly advanced calendars because of what the serpent taught them. It arrived on planet Earth from a distant part of the galaxy, and then it left after sharing its knowledge. But not before giving the Maya very specific details on its return. Think of it as an ancient save the date. The serpent god told the Maya it would return on December 21st, 2012. For those of you who can remember, I'm sure you won't forget the chaos in the days leading up to that date more than 10 years ago. Everyone thought the world was coming to an end. Not to worry, there's still time for the apocalypse. According to researcher Eric von Daniken, the Maya got their dates a little mixed up. Well, the Maya didn't. We did. The date of December 21st, 2012 was based on the Judeo-Christian calendar. That is not the calendar the Maya based their numbers on. Von Daniken's calculations say we were about 20 years too early. The real return of the feathered serpent might be in 2032. We could be about 7 years away from seeing the gods themselves descend from the heavens. That would almost make all the craziness of the last few years worth it. What other evidence is there, though, that the Maya got their technology from aliens? There's the tomb of Emperor Pakal at the city of Palenque in Mexico. On the lid of his sarcophagus is a carving that shows the emperor at the controls of what looks like a flying machine. It even has flames shooting out of its exhaust. Archaeologists say it's an image of the Tree of Life, but it sure does look like a rocket ship. Inside the sarcophagus, archaeologists found the mummy of the ancient ruler. They were very surprised to find that he was way taller than most people. Pakal also had an unusual bone structure and lived to be nearly 100 years old. Why was he so different from everybody else? Von Daniken thinks the epic pyramids of the Maya city of Tikal were built at the exact spot where the ancient gods visited. There were more than 60 pyramids standing in Tikal at one point, many aligned with constellations, like Orion. The Tikal pyramids were aligned with the stars, just like the pyramids at Giza. The Tikal pyramids were even built with a special mineral called mica, which can only be found about 3,000 miles away in Brazil. Mica is a highly conductive substance used these days for electrical capacitors. Perhaps aliens helped the Maya transport the conductive material from Brazil to Tikal, where it was installed in their pyramids. The pyramids may have served an electrical purpose that we can't even fathom right now. This theory is elaborated even further in the show Ancient Aliens. Perhaps the Tikal pyramids served the same purpose as the Egyptian pyramids. Perhaps the gods, or the alien visitors, knew how to use natural minerals to power their spaceships. Maybe they hovered above the pyramids while charging up their batteries. But what do you think? Do you think we'll see aliens in 2032? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Natural cooling and the worst heat wave ever. 2024 was brutal for the people of India, who endured one of the worst heat waves ever recorded. In the capital city of Delhi, temperatures reached upwards of 127 degrees Fahrenheit. That's hot enough to cook an egg on the sidewalk. To keep cool in a place where not everybody can afford air conditioning, people have been turning to ancient technology. Specialized pots made from nothing more than clay can be used to chill drinking water and keep someone's room cold. Not as cold as with AC, but it's better than roasting alive. This ancient technology doesn't require any electricity. It's portable, cheap, and very simplistic. The clay pots run on nothing but science and physics. You can even make one yourself if you have the right ingredients. Listen closely. First, get yourself a proper clay pot. Then fill the pot with water. The water will immediately start to seep out of the porous clay. When the water reaches the surface, it evaporates, thus pulling heat from the nearby air and from the water inside the pot. It's a two-pronged effect. The evaporation keeps the water cool enough to drink while reducing the air temperature. Keep enough of these clay pots around you, and it's like standing in the door of a refrigerator. This technique goes back to a time that people can't even remember. One of the makers of these pots now, founder of the company Cool Ant, Monish Siripurapu, said, "We have lost track of traditional systems." And isn't that the truth? People used to know exactly how to deal with heat waves using natural materials and inventions that seem to us today like magic. Pythagoras was a party pooper. Most people know Pythagoras for his famous theorem. What few people know is that the legendary mathematician from the 6th century BC was also a bit of a wet blanket at parties. He created an invention that ruined people's drinks, forcing them to practice moderation instead of gluttony. This strange little piece of technology is known as the Pythagoras cup. Some people also call it the greedy cup or the cup of justice. Archaeologists aren't sure if it was meant as a practical joke or as a statement against greed. The cup looks normal from the outside, but inside it's like a labyrinth. There are 4 chambers linked by a small open pipe. The pipe has an exit hole at the bottom of the cup. As long as the liquid remains below a certain level, it's okay. But when the cup is filled too much, liquid rises up the pipe, creates a siphon, and the entire cup drains out of the bottom of the hidden pipe. The result is all of your wine spilling down onto your shirt. The science behind the cup is sound. It's a simple gravity siphon, but still impressive considering this cup was fashioned as a gag 2,600 years ago. Even today, American flush toilets operate on the exact same principle. When the water level in your toilet bowl rises enough, it creates a siphon that empties the bowl. The Pythagoras cup essentially uses the same technology as a modern toilet. You're welcome. The Great Bark Shield of the Iron Age. In the annals of history, few artifacts have captured the imagination as much as the Enderby Shield. Discovered in the English countryside, this relic from the Iron Age, 2,300 years ago, has changed the way we understand ancient warfare. To this day, only a single bark shield has ever been discovered in all of Europe. It was found in 2015. There might never be another one like it recovered, ever. That's how rare ancient shields are, bark or otherwise. It was found near Enderby in England at a site called Everard's Meadows. The shield's construction is nothing short of impressive. It's allowing scientists to better understand the defensive technology used by soldiers during the Iron Age. I know that you see swords and shields being used all the time in games and movies, but this is the real deal. And it's come as a bit of a surprise because up until now, scientists weren't sure if bark shields were even a thing. This is the first time that bark has been found used to create a weapon of war. It took a lot more work than just putting 2 pieces of wood together in your inventory. To fully understand how Iron Age people crafted their shields, scientists used advanced analytical techniques like CT scans and 3D printing. They reconstructed the original structure of the shield and thus learned how it was crafted. The shield was put together with wooden laths that reinforced its structure. The edge was rimmed and the handle was covered in a woven boss designed to protect it from wear. The exterior was then covered in red checkerboard decorations. The shield looked pretty amazing and was just as much of an art project as it was a tool of survival. The bark itself came from a number of different trees, including apple, pear, hawthorn, quince, poplar, you name it. Then the whole thing was stitched together with fibers of grass and rush. You couldn't just scrape some bark off a tree and make a shield. This was a serious piece of work and an excellent example of real prehistoric technology, a technology used in some of the earliest wars fought between rival tribes. The crazy pipelines of ancient India. The Kiladi archaeological site in India is one of the most mysterious in the country. Recent excavations have shown that people who lived here more than 2,000 years ago were geniuses. They created a system of pipelines using nothing but clay. If you live in a house, you have pipes running through your walls, but this is no modern invention. People have had pipes running through their walls for a long time now, and in India, they did it better than in a lot of other places. The pipes at Kiladi belong to a sophisticated water management system. Workers took baked clay, formed it into tube shapes of terracotta, and then fused them together to create long pipelines. What's really amazing is that the pipelines aren't restricted to houses. How do you think the pipelines in the houses were fed? Water was brought from even farther away through an even more sophisticated series of city pipes. The whole system worked in the same way our system works today, but thousands of years ago. Water came from a fresh source, went through the city, straight to an ancient house's tap. Archaeologists know very little about the people who lived in Kiladi, but they can confidently say that they had an excellent understanding of hydraulic engineering. It makes you wonder how such an advanced civilization dwindled away to nothing. Only bits and pieces of the urban culture are left on the banks of the river, no more than shreds of evidence of lost greatness. It's possible these terracotta pipelines are remnants of smart technology from an even greater civilization. The ancient people of Kiladi could be descendants of the Indus Valley civilization, which existed thousands of years earlier and many miles to the north. If the technology is a remnant, then how many more advancements had been made around 2,000 years before? And why did technological achievements decline instead of increase? Any theories? Let me know in the comments. The oldest farming equipment ever. Archaeologists have found what they think could be the oldest agricultural machine ever used by human beings. It dates to almost 9,000 years ago, potentially placing it before Noah's flood. The piece of technology is one of the earliest known agricultural machines, something called a threshing sledge. The Romans called it a tribulum, yet it was being used long before the Romans ever existed. It was such a useful machine that the Romans used it just as their prehistoric ancestors did. Not just the Romans, but people throughout the Dark Ages, Middle Ages, and Renaissance. People were still using primitive threshing sledges in Europe until a couple decades ago. This invention was as popular as the chair or as sliced bread. The sledge might be even older than sliced bread. The threshing sledge is simple. It's a wooden board embedded with sharp stones, which could be attached to an animal and then dragged over freshly harvested crops. The sharp stones separated the grain from the straw. It made it a lot easier for early humans to collect grain. This innovation caught on quickly, revolutionizing farming from Spain to Turkey. Up until recently, scientists were of the opinion that the threshing sledge was a late invention. They thought it only arose with the most powerful of the early civilizations. However, a new study has proven that isn't the case. They found evidence of threshing sledges being used as early as 6500 BC in Greece. But not everybody was interested in using this new and exciting piece of tech, maybe like your grandpa and your new VR headset. Scientists found that certain regions were left behind and didn't start using this equipment for another 3,000 years. For example, the tool was used in the Near East long before it caught on in Western Europe. The implications are exciting. It could mean that the reason so many awesome civilizations emerged around Mesopotamia could be due to this one piece of technology. Whereas in Western Europe, where the threshing sledge didn't take off, there weren't any major civilizations that could rival Egypt or Assyria. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching! What civilization impresses you the most for their use of ancient technology?
Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed. Lohagad Fort. In India's Maharashtra state, there is a hill fort that sits nearly 3,400 feet above sea level. Known as Lohagad Fort, it dates at least as far back as the 1st or 2nd century BC, based on an inscription discovered in 2019. Since then, it's passed through the hands of several dynasties, at times functioning as both a living space and a treasury for storing valuables. Inscriptions found at the site suggest that Lohagad's origins are rooted in Jainism, a religion dating back to the 6th century BC. For the majority of its use, the fort was under the control of the Maratha Empire. It was also occupied by the Mughal Empire for 5 years. Several other dynasties ruled Lohagad for short periods as well. Everybody wanted it. The fort is located in the Western Ghats mountain range, which is considered one of India's most lush and biodiverse regions. In addition to Lohagad Fort, it's home to at least 325 globally threatened species. This incredible ancient fort now watches over this vast array of wildlife. The mountains moderate the surrounding area's tropical climate and represent one of the most telling examples of a geological feature influencing the monsoon cycle. Lost Sun Temple. In 1898, archaeologists discovered the Sun Temple of the 5th dynasty Egyptian king Nayusera, just south of Cairo. It wasn't until late last year that they uncovered evidence that Nayusera's temple was built on top of another, older Sun Temple dating as far back as the 25th century BC. Excavation co-director Massimiliano Nuzzolo explained that previous archaeology teams had assumed that the older construction simply represented an early building phase of Nayusera's temple. But it appears as though the older construction represents an entirely different building than the one that sits on top of it. This much is clear based on inscriptions naming kings who ruled before Nayusera, along with the remnants of 2 limestone columns and other architectural features. The first temple was made entirely from mud bricks, and the team found dozens of beer jars that were still intact. They date back to 1 or 2 generations before Nayusera was born. He ritually destroyed the mud brick temple to make room for the one that was built over it in his honor. The temple to Nayusera and others were dedicated to the sun god Ra. They were used as platforms for legitimizing a king's rule as the son of Ra. Nutsolo described Nayusera's temple as a place that was used for the deification of the king. In other words, to treat him like a god. It was similar in layout to the temple that stood before it, but was larger and made of stone. Only a few sun temples have been excavated. Historical sources indicate that there may be as many as 6, and that they are all in or near the Abu Ghurab dig site where Nayusera's temple was uncovered. World War II POW camp. Archaeologists in Oswestry, England, near the Welsh border, recently uncovered evidence of a World War II prisoner of war camp. The site, which once housed as many as 2,000 German POWs, consisted of several barracks scattered throughout a sports field and surrounded by farmland. Evidence suggests that the site operated from 1940 until 1948, 3 years after the war ended. Excavation leader John Winfer said that the conditions seemed relatively comfortable, all things considered. The camp had electricity, and the inmates had access to hot showers. There were sports games, musical performances, and jobs, including carpentry, as well as a school that the younger inmates could attend. Of course, not surprisingly, the camp's overseers enjoyed much nicer and more spacious accommodations. The living conditions that both the overseers and the prisoners experienced are pretty surprising to archaeologists, who expected to encounter evidence of a much grimmer scenario. But life there wasn't exactly like summer camp either. The team found signs of violence having occurred, as well as breakouts and civil unrest. They also found a German soldier's dog tag and are hoping to learn about the man's life by tracing the serial number. By continuing to study the site, they also hope to gain a clearer picture of what daily life was like for inmates and those who ran the camp. Small Rome military camp. Speaking of military camps, the Slovakian capital of Bratislava is home to a Roman military camp described by experts as a small Rome. Known as the Gerulata site, it dates back between the 1st and 4th centuries. It was part of the Limes Romanus, or Roman border. Located roughly a 20-minute drive from the city center, it was situated along a 3,000-kilometer boundary that spanned 3 continents at its peak, including Europe, Africa, and Asia. Gerulata helped to protect the eastern region of Rome's Pannonia province. Today, the designated UNESCO World Heritage Site consists mostly of the foundations of ancient buildings. During its heyday, the site contained civilian settlements, a military camp, watchtowers, 4 burial grounds, farms, and possibly even a port. Archaeologists found a wealth of artifacts, including coins, ceramic fragments, everyday objects made from bronze and iron, amber beads, and bone jewelry at the site. The team also found a damaged Roman officer's helmet, which likely belonged to an officer who was killed in a war against the Marcomannic tribe. This little-known yet major site lost its Roman influence during the 5th century with the invasions of Attila the Hun and the migration of Slavic peoples to the area. It's possible that the last Romans to live at Gerulata traded with early Slavic tribes, but their interactions were limited and short-lived, and the site was ultimately abandoned. Maggie's Wall. On the outskirts of the small Scottish village of Dunning, there is a 20-foot-high pile of stones topped by a cross and gifts from visitors, including pennies, feathers, shells, stuffed animals, and tea candles. Written on the stones in white lettering is the statement, "Maggie Wall burnt here in 1657 as a witch." At first glance, the idea of someone being burned at the stake for witchcraft makes a lot of sense. Between the 16th and 18th centuries, nearly 4,000 Scottish residents were accused of witchcraft. Most of them were women. An estimated 1,500 people died as a consequence of these allegations. But the historical record contains no traces of a woman named Maggie Wall being executed during a witch hunt. Even more strangely, the monument didn't appear until 1866. The surrounding forest has gone by the name of Maggie Wall's Wood since 1829, but it still doesn't explain the lack of evidence pointing toward Maggie's existence and execution. It's possible that Maggie Wall was a real person whose records failed to survive into modern times. According to local legend, a member of a powerful family called the Rollos may have had an affair with Maggie and built the monument out of guilt. Some believe that Maggie was singled out and punished as a member of a group of women who attacked officials in an attempt to elect a new local minister. It's the only monument of its kind, leading others to speculate that it was built in memory of all Scotland's accused witches who were murdered. But nobody knows for sure, and as things currently stand, your guess is as good as mine. What do you think? Was Maggie Wall's story lost to history? Was she really a witch? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. A shared cave. Until recently, experts believe that the Neanderthals in Europe died out around 40,000 years ago, just 5,000 years after modern humans arrived, and that the two groups had no contact with each other. A new study challenging these finds claims that our species, Homo sapiens, entered Europe around 54,000 years ago, much earlier than previously thought. They not only lived alongside the Neanderthals, they took turns living in the Mandarin Cave of southern France's Rhone region. In the words of prehistory expert Michael Petraglia, these findings have major implications for understanding the movement of modern humans out of Africa and the nature of our interactions with Neanderthals. This study is the result of over 30 years of excavation and research, which yielded hundreds of thousands of artifacts relating to both Neanderthals and humans. Included among the mix were several stone tools, or points, that early Homo sapiens used as spear tips. They resemble similar artifacts that were found in present-day Lebanon, nearly 1,900 miles away. This points toward the possibility that early humans may have traveled across the Mediterranean Sea, according to lead study author Ludovic Slimak. The team found no evidence of cultural exchanges between humans and Neanderthals, but they did detect signs that the cave changed hands between species over short time spans, including one transfer of ownership that took place over the span of about a year. Paleoanthropologist Katerina Harvati explained that while humans arrived in Europe earlier than originally thought, they didn't initially survive for long. They quickly died out and were replaced by Neanderthals until a later wave of Homo sapiens made their way to the continent. There's still a lot more left to learn about the migration of modern people, but this recent research adds one important piece to the puzzle. And now for number 4. But first, it's shout-out time! Want to say a big thank you to Big Doug and Dawn Day. Thanks so much for watching and spending time with us in our little corner of the internet. If you are new here, welcome, and be sure to subscribe for more videos like these. Elite Roman Mosaic. Archaeologists in London were recently taken aback when they began uncovering a rare and well-preserved Roman mosaic near the newly built Shard Glass skyscraper. The large 2,000-year-old piece of artwork was part of a triclinium, or dining room floor inside of an upscale motel, also called a mansio. You know, like mansion. It was in places like this that high-ranking officials and their guests could enjoy fine dining, entertainment, and overnight accommodations. According to the team, the room would have been vividly painted and filled with dining couches, showcasing the floor mosaic that is just now being revealed to the world for the first time in centuries. Consisting of 2 panels, it's the largest Roman-era mosaic to be discovered in London in at least a half-century. The largest of the 2 panels likely dates back to the 2nd or 3rd century. Archaeologist Dr. David Neal took a look at the piece and traced it to a team of mosaicists known as the Acanthus Group. They had their own unique local style, which they've become recognized for even in a historical context. Next door to the mansion, there was once another large Roman building. It was probably the residence of a wealthy family. Items including coins, jewelry, and decorated hairpins were all found at the site. They likely belonged to rich residents and visitors, and are a testament to the vast wealth that many privileged Roman citizens enjoyed. In 43 AD, the Romans invaded England and established Londinium. It became Roman Britain's largest settlement and was also an important port city. Londinium's population peaked at somewhere between 45,000 and 60,000 residents. Parts of the city are still visible today, including a section of Londinium's wall and parts of the amphitheater. Desert Shrine. While excavating a Neolithic campsite in a desert in Jordan, archaeologists found a shrine dating back 9,000 years ago. They discovered the ritual complex near large ancient animal traps known as kites, which were used for corralling wild gazelles for slaughter. Archaeologist Wael Abu Aziza described the site's uniqueness, particularly its remarkably preserved state. The shrine consisted of 2 standing stones bearing inscriptions of anthropomorphic figures, along with a hearth, altar, and a miniature representation of a gazelle trap. It's a major discovery that helps to shed light on the symbolism and culture of little-known Neolithic populations. Because the shrine is so close to the traps, experts believe that the people who lived here were specialized hunters, and that the traps played a major role in their lives. Known to the local Bedouins as the works of the old men, the stone structures have been found in Jordan, Syria, and Saudi Arabia. And while their exact connection to the shrine is unclear, it seems evident that a single population built both. Unique ancient burials. Last summer, workers in southwestern Siberia discovered numerous burial sites while performing routine road and rail work. Researchers excavated several of the graves in the Republic of Khakassia and found that they all dated back to the Bronze Age. The graves included the remains of several women who were laid to rest wearing their finest clothing and jewelry. Surprisingly, the burials were found untouched by looters and mostly undamaged by the elements. Experts traced the graves to the ancient Karasuk culture, which encompassed numerous semi-nomadic groups who moved from place to place with their sheep, cattle, and horses. They also farmed during the summer. The burials date back between 3,500 years ago until the 9th or 8th century BC. They contained grave goods such as pottery, meat, and knives bearing carvings of animal heads. It's possible that the knives reached Russia's Far East via the nomadic tribes that made them, or they ended up there through trade. Finding ancient settlements in Siberia is tricky because many, if not most of them, blend seamlessly into the landscape. In other words, someone has to be really looking in order to spot one. The Karasuks buried their dead inside sandstone enclosures that housed as many as 15 graves. As the deceased were laid to rest, the enclosure was filled and another was built next to it. The most important family member was usually buried in the middle of the pit and surrounded by the graves of others. Children were buried outside the enclosure. Sometimes bodies were placed directly into the soil, but they were also sometimes buried in box graves. This ancient culture also buried their pet dogs along with them. Huge Roman settlement. For the past year, archaeologists in Aylesbury, England, have been excavating a 2,000-year-old Roman settlement and cemetery, which sits along an ancient road called Aikman Street. They unearthed the remains of 425 people, including around 40 headless skeletons. Many of the decapitated bodies were buried with the person's head between their legs or by their feet. It's possible that the beheaded individuals were social outcasts or criminally accused. But researchers think that decapitation may have also been a normal, but not very common practice in the Roman world. Additionally, the team found evidence of cremation, which was also a rare burial practice. The cemetery appears to be divided into 2 sections, indicating that people may have been grouped based on ethnicity, family, or tribe. Based on the number of remains, archaeologists believe that the town saw a sudden influx of residents during the mid to late Roman period, most likely due to increased farming. They expect to learn much more as they continue to carry out their research. Thanks for watching! If you'd like to learn about more incredible archaeological sites, let me know in the comments below. And remember to subscribe if you haven't already. See you soon! Bye!